Good evening, or good morning, or good afternoon, or wherever you are in the world. It's 9 o'clock in the evening here in London, England. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to be talking about mystic moments, particularly looking at the septile and quintile aspects, which are not often understood. And I'm kind of a data nerd, so I got some data analysis I'll be doing, but I'll try to keep it light and simple. So my name is Alex Trenoweth. I was born in Port Huron, Michigan, but I've lived here in London for about 30 years, and I'm a professional astrologer and school teacher. So thank you very much for having me tonight. So my title is When a Flower Speaks. So it's, like I said, it's quite a personal story, and it takes place in India. It was my first time in India. We had just had a really big conference, and where we're all kind of suffering, after the conference, we're all kind of suffering that sort of lag you feel when you've been really keyed up for a few days and then you have to come back down again. And we traveled from Calcutta to Rishikesh, which is quite a few hours on a plane, a long taxi journey. And we were going to stay at an ashram. And I was really excited because I had never stayed at an ashram before. We were, it's a temple city, so there was no alcohol or drugs involved in this story because people sometimes ask me about it. And I went to sleep to my room at about 11 o'clock. And because I was tired, I went to sleep fairly quickly. And I had this very intense experience. And I kind of semi woke up. I was just awake enough to be aware that I was no longer in my bed. I was actually floating above my bed. And I became aware that there were other beings in the room. And it felt to me like I was being observed, and that my reaction to the situation was extremely important. Obviously, I didn't know how it was important or why it was important, but I just had that feeling that, I was being observed. And I also had the feeling that I knew that if I roused myself fully to consciousness, that I could do myself some serious injury. So, I let myself go back to sleep. And then the next thing I knew that the horn was being called for us to go to meditation at about 5 o'clock in the morning. So the other thing I was aware of was that the security light that came on was off. And after a couple of other nights, I realized that it turned off at about 12:30. So I've taken this time at 1 a.m. for the actual moment. What I've done with this chart is I've eliminated all the other aspects, and I just have the quintiles and septiles here, just to show you how I'm going to be working. So, this experience really changed me in the way I perceive the world, and I started collecting other people's mystic moments. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with this experience. It didn't make sense to me. I didn't understand it. I certainly did not invite it, and I was having a lot of trouble processing it. And I spent a lot of time thinking about it, what it could mean. Did I have an out-of-body experience? Was I near death? What had happened? And I didn't think I had died because I didn't see the white lights everybody talks about. And other people ask me about, did I think I was suffering sleep paralysis? And that is this phenomenon when your brain is awake, but your body is unable to move because your body, if you act out a dream as you sleep, you could do yourself some harm. So your body goes through this paralysis. And the sleep paralysis, when you become aware, it's just kind of, it's a very jarring experience. And so this is a very famous painting called The Nightmare, where the woman's having sleep paralysis and she's got the little demon on her chest. I didn't feel that this was sleep paralysis. I think I was a little bit too conscious of my surroundings for this to be that. And also sleep paralysis is usually accompanied by terror, which I certainly didn't feel either. So just to run through the Ptolemaic aspects, I'm sure if you're a more advanced astrologer that you know this, but just to help the beginners along a little bit, we know that the conjunction is when the planets are 0 degrees apart. They're really close together. Some people give them an orb of 8 degrees either side of that 0. In my septiles and quintiles, I keep really tight orbs of only 1 or 2 degrees when I'm calculating the charts. And oppositions, when the planets are opposite to each other, It's 180 degrees apart. Again, they usually give them quite a generous orb. The trine is 120, the square is 90, and the sextile is 60. So the sextiles, most astrologers, I would say, give it 4 degrees either direction, but the trine and square are also 8 degrees of orb. And then we get into the more minor aspects, the quincunx or the inconjunct at 150 degrees, the sesquiquadrate at 135, and the semi-square. Now these aspects, we keep them fairly tight as well, only 1 or 2 degrees. Now quintiles and biquintiles are the ones that, two of the ones I want to focus on. So they're interpreted as a strong creative flow of energy between the planets involved, often an opportunity for something performative, entertaining, or expressive. You know, so we can see that there's something here that allows creativity to flow. I actually call the quintiles kind of the Frankenstein effect. It's like when you have an opportunity to create something that is really outside the bounds of what might be considered safe or extremely inventive. And another researcher has done some work on some mystic moments. A couple of these examples I'll use in this presentation. But they found that in a group of mystic moments, keeping that tight orb, the quintile aspects were more likely to be in effect when the orbs are really super tight. So that's why I've chosen to keep these orbs really small with quintiles and septiles. The septiles, those degrees are 51 degrees apart, 103 degrees apart, or 154. And quite a different interpretation of septiles. It's a mystical aspect that indicates a hidden flow of energy between the planets involved, often involving spiritual or energetic sensitivity and an awareness of finer and more subtle hidden levels of reality involving the planets in a septile aspect. So this is kind of a deeply, not quite a spiritual experience, but it's an experience that is going to evoke this idea of mystery and wonder. And the word I often hear people associate with septiles is the word awe, A-W-E, awe. What we found in studying the mystic moments is also there's a deficit of squares, that these aspects are not, if you take, look at the analysis of the chart of the mystic moments, there's a lack of squares. So an abundance of quintiles and septiles and an absence of squares. So the first person I want to talk about in his mystical moment is Thomas Aquinas. He's actually one of my favorite people in history because he lived at this point where the Aristotelian way of looking at the world and the Platonic way of looking at the world sort of converged, and he had to balance these two things. And he was more or less responsible for us embracing more of Aristotle's ideas and philosophies. So this is his mystic moment. Now he had two. Now, there was one where he was levitating, and I've looked for the date for this moment and I tried to find it. I've looked for it for years and I can't find the date. I even contacted my friend in Italy to help me, and I couldn't find it. But he did have something that might count as a second mystic moment, but we'll look at why it's not quite a mystical moment. So let me describe what happened. He was in church in the morning doing his prayers and reading, and he became, the accounts say, in a state of ecstasy. And he had been writing his book, Summa Theologica, and he was extremely full of God. And he became very excited, very jubilant, and after the service was over with, or after the morning prayers were over with, he kind of sunk into this depression or this tiredness. And he didn't really finish his great work. He more or less stopped writing it. And a few months later, he died. So just looking at it, and this is how I'm going to do the analysis for these charts. I'm going to look at the aspect frequency. So I want to know which aspect occurs most often. Now, in his mystic moment, it was the quincunx aspect that was the most common. So if you see it here, it's 89% more often that it occurs than average, than what we would expect. And then we see that the quintiles and biquintiles are actually in deficit, except for the biquintiles, which is slightly more than what we would expect. So the most frequent aspect is the quincunx in his experience. And then the next thing I do is I sort them by orb. So I want to look at maximum orb. So which is the most exact? And we see that it's Sun semi-square Venus. So he was in this ecstasy, this extreme state of happiness. And but once he was released from this, he kind of plummeted into this maybe a life of banality compared to what he'd experienced. And he basically wrote no more. So I don't think this is quite a mystic moment, because mystic moments are inspiring and they create this sense of creativity and needing to do something with it. And so Thomas stopped writing. He didn't do it anymore. My next case study is Doreen Virtue. Very interesting person. She writes a lot about, past tense. She wrote a lot about angels, and she had a mystic experience. Her mystic experience goes on this date that she'd attended church, and it was in the evening, and she saw Jesus Christ in a vision, and she suddenly got the idea that what she was doing with the angel work was all wrong, and she completely turned her back on this kind of work. And she had made quite a lot of money. She had become quite well known for this kind of work. So she did this 180-degree turn, and essentially just started writing stuff about the Bible and telling people how wrong it is to work with the angels and to tarot cards and probably astrology as well. So a huge change in the way that she was working. So you can see just by looking at this chart, there's quite a lot of quintiles and septiles. But let's look at the analysis. So we can see that the aspect that occurs most often is actually the sextiles. Now, sextiles to me are planets that are cooperating together, and they're producing and doing things and working well with each other to do something. She has quite a lot of conjunctions as well, and some sesqui-squares, excuse me. So I think what this shows is that there's a lot more to do with having the right time to do something in her experience. So I don't think her experience quite qualifies for a mystic moment either. And so here I just highlighted the quintiles. But if you look at the maximum orbs, they occur, quite often. But the closest orb is the moon trine the sun. It's only 12 minutes, and it's applying. So it's a busy chart, lots going on there, but I don't think it's quite a mystic moment. To me, there just seems to be like there's an active opportunity. Something is there that she could use it to her advantage. And she did, because she's managed to build a new career in a completely opposite direction. Hazel Courteney, she was a journalist, and she had an experience where she went through the styles at Harrods, which is a big department store here in London, and she started to feel like her heart was racing. And so she went to her doctors thinking that she was having a heart attack, and she was having a difficult time because she is bereft of a friend, Princess Diana, who had died months before in that terrible car crash in Paris. And she felt very close to Diana when she died, and she had this vision that Diana had walked into her body, and Hazel got to experience Diana's final moments of her life, and that she was felt that she was on the floor of the car, that she was on her way to death, and Hazel felt that her physical experiences were actually her experiencing Diana's imminent death. So this is just an interview that she did. It never works on Zoom, so I'm not going to try it again, because if you don't hear the sound very well, I can hear it, but you won't hear it. So she's just talking about her experience of this, and how it changed her life, because she's supposed to be this important journalist, and she wasn't really into these kinds of things. But this experience, of course, took her to a different way of thinking. So here's her mystic moment. Now, this is the time that I've used here. It's not the Herod's time. It's the time in the evening where she had another episode, and she experiences this last moments of Diana's death. So I've taken all the other aspects out and just focusing on septiles and quintiles. But in the data analysis, if we look at which is the most common common aspect, we see that it's actually the sesqui-square that's quite high, but biquintiles are quite high as well, and triseptiles are also very, very high. So I was thinking that this does seem to show that there was some sort of mystical moment that was going on, something that is mysterious, can't be proven, things that we can't only happen maybe once in a lifetime, if ever at all. So here I go again. I looking at maximum orbs, which is a Titus orb, and Neptune, a biquintile, the nodes is quite strong. And what I find is that the nodes are actually quite strongly activated in the experiences that I think qualify as a mystic moment. So this is a bi-wheel. Diana is in the middle, and Hazel Courteney's mystic moment is on the end. And what I found very interesting was we have a north node on Diana's Pluto, and then over here we have Pluto on the ascendant of the mystic moment. And other important things, Venus on Chiron. So there does seem to be some sort of connection here that's transformative and takes a person, changes their life, takes them out of the ordinary into the extraordinary. And when we return back to the ordinary, they feel that something has shifted or something has changed. And if you want to read more about the article, here's a link down here, and you can see the headline, "Friends Say I'm Mad, but I Heard Princess Diana." So the aspect frequency analysis of this synastry is so looking at Hazel's chart compared to Princess Diana's chart. So we can see that the semi-squares are quite strong, but there's biseptile and triseptile action going on, lack of quintiles. But I still think that this septile, this mysterious moment, is still showing there. And then I'm just looking at the maximum orb, and we see because it's a communication, she felt that she heard Diana's voice. So Mercury quintile, the sun. So she's bringing it out and talking about it. Chiron septile, Mars, the experience itself, the death or the wounding was there, and the suddenness and shock of it all shows there too. Musmuri was a fairly young man, and he had this experience. He was just walking around in his own back garden, and he felt like he was illuminated from within. And after he had this experience, and as I said before, people often talk about feeling awe, or bright, vivid colors start to come to them, or their hearing sharpens. There's some sort of heightened awareness that goes on. But after he had his mystic moment, what he wanted to do was he wanted to create this very famous magazine of the 1960s called Gandalf's Garden, which was partly responsible for bringing about the revolution of the 1960s. So here is his chart, his natal chart. Now this is a noon chart, I'm afraid, but we could still see, if we take the angles out, that this is quite a lot of septiles and quintiles. So here we go. Look at the quintiles. So this is a really good example of somebody who had this experience and turned it into something that's creative, something that inspired other people to become involved in a movement that changed America. So 227%. I mean, that above above what we would expect. That's huge. And 82% of septiles, I mean, that's not too bad. Not many septiles, biseptiles, but it kind of makes up for it with the triseptiles. So I think it's an intensely mystical moment that fits the criterion. And if we look at maximum orbs, we have Uranus quintile Pluto. That's happening in this chart. And of course, we know that the 1966, the Uranus Pluto conjunction is often one that people point to for changing the world and for the people who were born within that revolution, who grew up to change a lot of policies in the healthcare systems and other things. So here's this mystic moment, taken at about 5 p.m. in Larnaca, Cyprus. So here it's, well, you can see that there is this magical formation. Someone told me this is called a magician's hat, when the triangle actually closes. I haven't heard that, that expression before, but apparently that's what they call it in South Africa. Here's a frequency analysis. So a lot fewer septiles than we would expect on this frequency analysis, but the biquintiles are quite strong compared to the other aspects on here. And this is, like I did with Diana and Hazel, here is Ms. Murray's chart compared to the Mystic Moment chart. And the septiles is very, very strong. Yeah, septiles are very, very strong. 150% more than we would expect from just the average chart. So I think his moment does count as one that's mystical. And then I just looked at the aspect list again, looking at the Titus orb, and it is Saturn biseptile the moon. So he went to work and he used these feelings to create something that was quite extraordinary. Emanuel Swedenborg, a kind of scientific kind of person, had this experience where he lived this kind of life where he was very methodical, always very logical. And then he had this experience that completely changed his life, and very much the way that Ms. Murray described, that he was outside and suddenly things got very vivid, and he started to feel like there was something calling to him, something that he had to change the way that he worked. So he created a little amulet and he sewed it in his pocket, and it says fire of God, fire of Abraham, not just me, but the whole. And they found this amulet sewn in the lining of his jacket when he died. So he kept it with him from that moment. So here's this mystic moment, April 7th, 1744 in the Netherlands, just what the chart looks like. And if we start doing the analysis, we can see that quintiles are very, very high. They recur more often than they do for any other aspect. So he took this experience and it changed him so profoundly that he had to have this little reminder of what had happened to him, and he kept it close to him for the rest of his life. And then looking at the most exact aspect, we can see that it's Mercury biseptile Neptune. So I think it does count as a mystical moment because it inspired his thinking. He stopped being this logic guy and always thinking that the world can be contained within a firm boundary, and he became a lot more open to spiritual experiences. Blaise Pascal, he was the inventor who pretty much gave us the modern calculator, even way back then. Sort of a similar experience to the others. He just felt this intense feeling in his chest of love and of needing to be a part of something bigger than himself. And it's got quite a high number of semi-squares. Now, I don't think Blaise Pascal had the same kind of experience that Emanuel Swedenborg felt. I think it's something a little bit different because Pascal didn't use this experience to create something or to change his life the same way that Pascal had experienced it. So I'm not quite sure if it's as important an experience as Swedenborg's. However, the biseptiles is quite high, and but the semi-squares occur more often, just by a few percentage points. But you know, that's the kind of experience that was important enough to him that he recorded it and left a record of it. And here's his most exact aspects. And Mercury opposite Pluto is the most exact. So not about quintile or septile or anything like that, but an opposition to Mercury. So, you know, you can wonder, you know, if it's changed his way of thinking or if it gave him a moment of inspiration. We're not quite so sure what he got out of it, but he, as I said, he re-recorded it and wanted to remember it in some way. Rajneesh Chandra Mohan Jain, we call him Osha, quite a controversial character. This is his birth chart. Now, he's a mystic. He created his own kind of movement. As I say, highly controversial. But a lot of people listened to his teachings. He kind of kept getting himself into trouble a lot. But you know, he changed a lot of people's thinking. He got people interested in the Indian mystic movement. And a lot of people came to India, wanted to visit India because of his teachings. So this is his natal chart. So he has a lot of biquintiles and a lot of biseptiles, and those are the most common in his chart. So he has this way of communicating, this way of working with people that make them think that he is a guru, that he is somebody who possesses knowledge and can do things that the ordinary people can't do. So if we sort everything out by maximum orb, Sun biseptile, the node is the strongest. So we got these node connections again. And he did become famous, and he did change a lot of people's lives. So his mystic moment, again, similar to the others, he was watching, had been out walking late at night, and a feeling of being called or wanting to do something more with his life, of wanting to walk with the gods came over him. So if we look at the aspect frequency analysis, look at the septiles and triseptiles. You know, so there's not much doubt in my mind looking at this, that, you know, this opened up a great spirituality to him and inspired, he went on to inspire other people to join his movement and to look at the way that he was looking at the world. This is my friend Elizabeth Barton. I have permission to tell her story. She was in Stonehenge and at sunrise, and she was near the stones. You can't go near the stones now. Now it's all cordoned off, and National Heritage doesn't let you go touch the stones at all, except I think on the solstice, but obviously not this year. But she heard this voice in her head telling her to move forward, to go forward, and to touch the stones. So she, when she touched the stones and put her forehead against the stones, she had this feeling that she was kind of melting into the stones. And then once she finished melting into the stones, she was like teleported, and she would pop up into different areas of holiness around the world. And so she felt that there was some sort of connection between all these holy places. And when she came out of this, obviously, when you have an experience like that, the first thing you think of is, you know, have I lost my mind? Is there something that is wrong with me? Did I have some sort of medical emergency? But she found it miraculous that this picture, did not know this picture had been taken. She, at the end of the trip, apparently they had all put out pictures that they had taken. This is quite a long time ago, so it was when pictures were printed. And she was astounded to see this picture of herself at this moment, touching these rocks and having this experience. And she doesn't know who took the photo. It's a complete mystery to her. So she gave me her date of birth, but I just want to focus on the mystic moment for now. So, you know, we know that it's at sunrise, but you can see that there's that magic hat, magician's hat configuration again. So just look at the triceptiles on here, you know, 208% more, occurring more often than what we'd expect just from the average chart. And then biquintile is very strong as well. So I do think that this is her mystic moment. So I wanted to see what her natal planets looked like against this experience. So look at Pluto and Mars, exactly conjunct. Chiron and the North Node, exactly conjunct. And there's other things. The Moon and Jupiter, almost exactly conjunct. And then of course, Jupiter conjunct the Sun with the event. So a great connection to her birth chart. So after this, she's now a priest, a celebrant. She is a healer as well. She does a lot of great work with the archangels now, and she lives out in San Francisco. And when she told me this story, you know, it was one of those moments where you feel the chills, the hairs in the back of your neck stand up on end, and especially to learn how much it changed her life and how much it inspired her to bring her work and to share it with other people. Whereas before she'd been reluctant to do this, after the event, she wanted to share what she had learned. Now, Jane Goodall is a new one for me. Sorry, it's a little bit cut off on the corner. I heard from my friend Ray Grassi that Jane had an experience. And so I thought, wow, this is fantastic. I want to hear about this experience. So I ordered her book and a couple of weeks ago, and I was getting a little nervous because I really wanted to hear about her experience, but I didn't have the book. Well, the book arrived this morning. So here we go. I'm just going to read a little bit of it because I think it's absolutely fascinating. So I'm reading this. Her book is called Reason for Hope, An Extraordinary Life of Jane Goodall. In the soft sunlight, the chimpanzees' black coats were shot with coppery brown. The branches on which they sat were wet and dark as ebony. The young leaves are pale but brilliant green. And behind was the dramatic backcloth of the indigo sky where lightning flickered and distant thunder growled and rumbled. Lost in awe at the beauty around me, I must have slipped into a state of heightened awareness. It is hard, impossible really, to put into words the moment of truth that suddenly came upon me then. Even the mysteries are unable to describe their brief flashes of spiritual ecstasy. It seemed to me, as I struggled afterward to recall the experience, that self was utterly absent. I and the chimpanzees, the earth and the trees and the air seemed to merge, to become one with the spirit power of life itself. The air was filled with feathered symphony, the evensong of birds. I heard new frequencies in their music and also in the singing insect's voice, notes so high and sweet I was amazed. Never had I been so intensely aware of the shape, the color of the individual leaves, the varied patterns of the veins that made each one unique. Scents were clear as well, easily identifiable, fermenting, overripe fruit, waterlogged earth, cold, wet bark, the damp odor of chimpanzee hair, and yes, my own too. And the aromatic scent of young crushed leaves was almost overpowering. I sensed a new presence and saw a bushbat quietly browsing upwind, his spiraled horns gleaming and his chestnut coat dark with rain. And I just love that. I love the synchronicity. I got the book this morning, but I just love the idea that her senses were heightened. She was seeing things that she had never seen them before, which I think is a hallmark of mystical moments. So unfortunately, I don't have the time, which is a bit of a problem with these mystic moments. Not everyone stops to check their watch. But I do have her birth chart here, and I just thought, okay, you know, if I get this on the same day that I'm doing this talk and I've been waiting for all this time, there must be some reason or something in what information I have that we can have a look at. So here's her birth chart, and oops, sorry, went ahead too fast. Here's a birth chart, and you can see I haven't quite had time to analyze this, but you can see she's also got this magician's hat configuration in her chart. And she's got another closed triangle here too with the quintiles. So you know, you can just see by looking at it, there's an unusual number of quintiles involved in this moment. And look at Neptune biquintile the sun. You know, so something inspirational, something that caused her to pause in her work and what she was doing to really appreciate the beauty that was around her. And like Emanuel Swedenborg, she wrote it down. It meant enough to her that she wanted to record it. Unfortunately, just not the time. The other one that's new to me too is my friend Rod. His experience, what happened here in England, in that he was studying over here, and he was with some friends, and they took an early morning bus from Bath at about 8 o'clock to go to Glastonbury. And it's about a 2-hour journey to go to Glastonbury. And they were sitting around talking, and he suddenly felt compelled to take a walk. And he was drawn to this tree. And like Elizabeth, he kind of embraced the tree, and he felt like he had become one with the tree, that he was experiencing all these things. And he said that he cried, and he was so full of emotion, so full of awe, he said the word. And you know, he just really felt that he had come one with this old yew tree. And later on, he found out this yew tree is quite a special one. It's the oldest tree in Glastonbury, and it's right near Chalice Wells as well. So without even doing a data analysis, you can see that there's a really huge number of quintiles. And then we have that magician's hat there again with the closed quintiles. So one of the things that was suggested to me when I had a second mystical moment, which kind of acted like a bookend. But let me tell you what happened first of all. This really unusual thing. I had my second mystical moment, and I was pretty upset about it. And you're going to see why I was upset about it, because I thought I was losing my mind. And the first person I ran in to talk to, I came into this restaurant, and I was just kind of beside myself with worry. And I was at this research conference, and it's all these smart men around me, and I just felt like I had to like calm myself down. So the restaurant was quite busy, but there was one guy with purple hair, believe it or not, that was sitting by himself. So I asked if I could sit down, and we got to talking, and wouldn't you know it, this guy was an alien abductee. And so I told him my stories, and he was fairly convinced that I had been abducted by aliens, as he had. And that didn't feel right to me. But it did compel me to have a look at some very famous stories of alien abductees, and what was going on in the charts, and do they count as mystical moments? By the way, at the end of this weekend, when the conference was over, I very much wanted to thank this guy with purple hair for helping me out, because I didn't have a meltdown. I didn't freak out. I didn't, I was completely respectable for the whole entire weekend. And I just wanted to thank him for taking the time to talk to me. So I looked around, I didn't see anybody with purple hair. So I went back to the restaurant, and I asked people if they knew this guy. And I described his purple hair, and they just looked at me like, I had lost my mind. They're like, we haven't seen anybody who had purple hair come here. So, there you go. A very odd experience. Okay, so here is the first recorded experience of alien abductees. It's the typical kind of alien abductee experience. A couple was driving late at night, and there were some flashing lights. The car electronics went a bit bonkers, and then they didn't. 2 hours had passed, and they came back. But they had memories of experiments done on them. They had under hypnosis. They had these unusual experiences and things that just didn't quite fit into what we would call a normal existence. So I thought, okay, let's analyze this. So, it's if anything, it shows a lack of the quintile and septile aspects. You know, there's no septiles. You know, by quintiles, there's fewer of them. So, you know, I don't think that this particular event counts as a mystical moment, not the way that I've been describing it. So this is another one, a very well-known episode. And just by looking at it, you can see that there's not a lot of septiles and quintiles in this experience. And again, you know, the aspects that we've been looking at, quintiles and septiles, are, you know, pretty much absent from this chart. So occurring at a much lower frequency than we would expect. So I'd like to analyze more alien abductee experiences, but they're quite hard to come by with the time. But I think from these two, you can see, or we kind of get the idea, or we could create a hypothesis that the alien abductions are not a mystical, don't count as a mystical moment. All right, so this is my second mystical moment. So I was at this research, astrological research conference in Florida, and I was feeling really decidedly like I wasn't adequate. And there is absolutely no reason for me to feel like this. You know, I can number crunch with the best of them, but being around all these smart men, I just felt like my confidence just dwindle away. And I was kind of, I would say I was having quite a bad time of it. And I was feeling like, for the only time, I wasn't feeling like I wanted to give my lecture. I just wanted to go to my hotel room and close the door and just forget about it all. And I was feeling bad. And I came out of my hotel room to get some breakfast. And almost immediately, my eyes were drawn to this flower, this very flower that you're looking at. And it's like it was like a magnet for me, and it was so beautiful. The colors just jumped out at me. The contrast between the vibrant pink and the lush dark green really attracted it to me. And I thought to myself, I have got to get a better look at this flower. And I looked at this flower, it got up really close to it, and the flower said to me in a human voice, "You know, it hurts to blossom." And I thought to myself, okay, that's it, Alex, you know, you've lost the plot. Flowers don't speak. Everyone knows that flowers don't speak. You are making things up. You're imagining things. You need to go take some aspirin and lie down. So I was really shaken up by this, and not feeling, not feeling like I could do my lecture. And I just really couldn't bear it. So I went to this restaurant, and then I had my conversation with this purple-haired guy. And because of this purple-haired alien abductee, it was the reason why I got up on stage and probably delivered the best lecture of my life. All beautifully researched and lots of numbers in them, like I like things. So this is my chart, my natal chart. So just looking, you know, do I have more quintiles and septiles? So I have quite a few septiles. I have a lot of sextiles as well. So, you know, it's kind of hard to ask the question, will somebody have a mystical experience, just by looking at septiles and quintiles, I think, because I had two. And then looking at the maximum orbs, you can see that the moon is quincunx Chiron. And again, that's my natal chart. So this is the ashram moment. I haven't done a whole lot of work around it, but you know, just thinking about the stuff that has happened. So we see that there's some action here from Chiron to the North Node. There's a lot of stuff happening around the nodes. Now, 22 degrees is the degree of my South Node. So the mystic moment runs on my nodal axis, around ascendant, descendant. So looking at the ashram mystic moment, the septiles are 264% above chance, and biseptiles and triseptiles are 82% above chance. So I think that the ashram mystic moment qualifies as a mystic moment just based on the number of septiles in that chart. And then this is the moment of the flower. So after this flower spoke to me, and I was kind of panic stricken. I asked a friend of mine to take a picture of the flower for me because my phone was charging. I forgot my charger or the adapter or something. And I asked him to take a picture of it. So it's time stamped. So this is probably the most accurate mystic moment. Others probably vary by a few minutes here or there, but this is exact. So as I said, this is up here. This is my Neptune at 19 degrees Scorpio. So strong links to my natal chart. And the reason why I like talking about my own experience, it's not because I have Moon in Leo, although I do. It's because, I can talk about what happened to me. I mean, because I could talk with authority about what happened because it happened with me. So, I'm trying to relay the experience as best as I possibly can. So we can see here that the septiles are quite high, and the quintiles as well are quite high, the most frequently occurring aspects of that experience. So I think mystic moment number 2 does qualify as a mystic moment. So just let me tell you about how this moment has changed my life. I do feel like there was the guy with purple hair told me that he felt my ashram experience waking up was I had interrupted some sort of download that was happening, and I kind of agree with that because I felt that something wasn't finished, and I didn't know quite what to do with it. Now, the flower incident, when the flower spoke to me, that profoundly changed my life because I got over that feeling of inadequacy and that feeling that I wasn't as smart as the boys around me. And I started doing a lot more work, becoming a lot more comfortable with working with numbers and analyzing things a little bit more carefully. I became happier in my own way of doing things. I sort of created my own way of researching and working within the definition of how scientific study might work. I became more confident in doing peer reviews and improving my work. And I never had that feeling, that awful, awful feeling that I didn't fit in or that I wasn't good enough in the circumstance of research or giving lectures. So, from there, I do give quite a lot of lectures, all online now, of course, but I was traveling quite a lot before or after this experience. So I do think, my own personal experience is that, these experiences do profoundly change you. For me, I believe that, there are other dimensions out there. I do think that the moment of my experience in ashram, that there was this, the planes of existence had crossed over, and then I became aware of another dimension. The flower experience, I felt that those were the words that I needed to hear. It hurts to blossom. And I realized a couple days ago, the thing that stands out in my mind, what the flower said was, it said, so it was saying that I already know that it hurts to burst out, that something so beautiful can come from such pain. So it said, well, I just realized, watching myself doing some lectures, that is a bit of a verbal tick of mine, and I've been trying very hard not to say or just try. So I think that's part of the experience as well. So the mystic moment chart, looking at the flower, looking at the most important Titus orb, Mercury biseptile Uranus. So something unexpected, and inanimate, as we might think, would speak to me. The surprise and the profundity, maybe, as well. So just putting these two experiences in a bi-wheel, and just thinking about how they work together, and how I felt like they were kind of like bookends. So we can see that the sun of the flower is on the Mercury of the ashram mystic moment. And there are other connections. I mentioned the moon is exactly on my north Neptune, and the ascendant is my south node. but Jupiter and the moon are quite close too. So and there's a lot of action going down here too. I do collect mystic moments, and if you have one, and especially if you know the time, I really, really would love to hear from you. I've gotten quite a few new additions to this research. So you can contact me on my website, www.alextrenoweth.co.uk, and just leave me a message. I'll get back to you, and we can have a little chat about the experience it's had on you. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I gave you some food for thought, and thank you very much for having me, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions from our audience? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Catch you next time.
Thank you. See you later.